Hi and welcome to this How to Knit a Cactus video from gathered.how. We'll be walking you through our free knitted cactus pattern, showcasing the small round cactus. We're going to start by casting on 48 stitches. We're going to be working the knitted cactus in the round, spreading the stitches across double pointed needles. It's much easier to cast on to just a single needle and then transfer your stitches across the DPNs afterwards. That's what we're going to be doing, and we'll show you how it's done in this video. If you need a bit more advice on how to cast on in knitting, we have a video guide dedicated entirely to this, which I'll put a link in for you now. Once you've cast on your 48 stitches, you want to divide them evenly over 4 DPNs. We've done the maths for you, so we can tell you you need to put 12 stitches onto each of your DPNs. We've cast them all onto this single needle, so now we're just going to work along, slipping stitches from one needle to the other, counting each one until we have a total of 12 on one of the needles. Now we'll take our second needle and do exactly the same thing again. So we're slipping those stitches from the needle we cast onto the second of our DPNs, and we're going to keep counting them one at a time until we have got 12 of the stitches onto the double pointed needle. If you lose track of the number on your needle, don't worry, just go back, count them again, and make sure you add any extra stitches you need to get that number up to 12 stitches on each of your needles. We've now got 12 on those first 2 DPNs, so we're going to take our third double pointed needle and slip 12 more stitches onto this one too. Once we've slipped those 12 stitches onto the third double pointed needle, we're left with 12 on the original casting on needle now. So you've got all of your 48 stitches distributed evenly across your 4 double pointed needles. This means we're ready to begin knitting. We're going to start by placing a marker at the beginning of the round to make sure we can keep an eye on this and not lose our place once we've knitted a few rows. We're joining our knitting into the round by knitting our first stitch. Take the first DPN in one hand and an empty DPN in the other and start knitting row 1. The stitch pattern is an adaptation of a basic rib where you knit into the back of one stitch and then purl the next stitch. You'll repeat these 2 stitches again and again throughout the knitted cactus. Knit into the back of the loop and purl are the only stitches you'll need to complete this design. Getting to the end of one double pointed needle will leave you with a free double pointed needle that you've just knitted all the stitches from. This then becomes your working needle. So take that into your right hand and then you can start knitting the stitches on the next needle. We're working exactly the same stitch pattern where we knit into the back of one loop and then we purl the next loop. We are going to repeat this stitch pattern again and again and again for 30 rows until we've created enough knitted fabric to make our knitted cactus design. It gets much easier to handle the double pointed needles the more practice you get with them and the more stable they become as you create knitted fabric to sit on them and hold your shape together. this is how our knitting looks when we're just about to start our final round, round 30. Like all your other rounds, this stitch pattern is exactly the same. So we're knitting into the back of the loop, then we're purling one stitch, then we're knitting into the back of the next loop, and then we're purling one stitch, knitting into the back of the loop rather than working a regular knit stitch changes the direction that the needle enters the stitch, which means that you end up with a twisted stitch. This gives you a different effect to your standard rib pattern, and you end up with a more linear quality and pronounced shape, which works really well in the knitted cactus design. But if you're a beginner and still trying to get to grips with the basics of knitting, it's fine to work a stitch pattern of a regular knit stitch purl stitch repeated all the way through the design, and that way you'll still get a brilliant cactus that will look fantastic knitted up, and it'll just save you the extra step of learning how to knit through the back of the loop. We do have a video guide dedicated to how to knit rib stitch aimed for new knitters, so I'll put a link to that here if you want to try the more basic method and still create a brilliant knitted cactus design. If you're sticking with the knitted cactus pattern as we have on gathered.how, keep working your way along, knitting into the back of the loop, then purling a stitch, then knitting into the back of the loop, then purling a stitch until you've completed 30 rounds of this pattern. If you want to see a written version of this knitting pattern or read our instructions online, I'll put a link in now for the pattern on gathered.how. That marker we placed earlier will help us know that we've reached the end of our round. And we've now completed all 30 rounds of our cactus. So we're going to break the yarn. You want to leave a reasonably long thread tail, about 5 inches will probably be enough. Thread the end of your yarn shell onto a darning needle. Another thing that makes this such a nice design for beginners is we don't have to actually cast off the knitting. Instead, we're going to slip each of the stitches onto the darning needle. So you're then pulling the thread tail through, which will fasten off the stitches in this way. So work your way all around your 4 double pointed needles, slipping every stitch on each needle onto your darning needle, and then pull your thread tail through the stitches. Once you've slipped all the stitches from a double pointed needle onto the darning needle, you can remove the needle, and when you've got all the stitches onto that thread tail, you pull it tight to close the end of the cactus. You want to pull it as tightly as you can, and then we're going to weave in the loose end and stuff it with some toy stuffing. Toy stuffing is commercially available, or upcycle some from an old toy, or just use cotton wool or rags if you like. If you're working with commercial toy stuffing or other fibres, it's much easier if you break off smaller chunks and then try and stuff your cactus in this way. Gives you the chance to shape as you go, slipping any small bits of stuffing into different spaces to make sure you end up with a really nice plump cactus like we've got here. We're just going to add a few more little tufts of our toy stuffing to give him a really nice round finish, and then we're going to sew up the bottom of the cactus to secure the stuffing in place. Hold your yarn tail in your left hand while you work a few other stitches in the bottom of the cactus to help secure the thread end and make sure that you get to keep it nice and tight. Now you just want to work your way along the bottom of the cactus with different small short stitches closing up that hole. We're not going to see the bottom of the knitter's cactus once it's in place, so don't worry about being too neat. You just want to secure the bottom edge so that the toy stuffing stays in place and isn't visibly poking out. Secure the end of your yarn through of your stitches at the end. Cut the edge and your cactus is finished. Give him a nice final shape in your hand and pot him in a pot to show him off to great effect in your home. We hope you've enjoyed this tutorial from gathered.how. Please like and subscribe for more craft projects from us.